Get ready to start our election protection strategy session. This is the heart of the matter why we're here, really here for the Shelby Summit, and I was hoping we'd have some more people in the room, but hopefully they'll trickle in because we have an amazing set of panelists here who's going to give us some really great information that we can take back to our community. To start off, the right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy. It's the fundamental freedom that empowers each citizen to have a voice in shaping the nation's future. It is a sacred privilege that countless individuals have fought and sacrificed for, ensuring that every American, regardless of race, gender, or background, has equal say in the governance of our society. Yet today, this precious right is under unprecedented attack. Across the country, we witness the efforts to undermine voter access through restrictive laws, gerrymandering, discriminatory practices designed to disenfranchise marginalized communities. These actions threaten the very fabric of our democracy and silencing voices that deserve to be heard and eroding the trust that binds us together as a nation. It is our duty to stand firm against these assaults on our voting rights. We must fight to protect and expand access to the ballot box, ensuring that every eligible voter, and I'll say that again, every eligible voter can participate freely and fairly in our democratic process. The future of our nation depends on it. Voting is not just a right, it is a responsibility and a powerful tool for justice, equality, and change. So let us defend it with an unwavering resolve. Now, I am not an expert in election protection, but these three amazing people over here to my right are, and I'm going to give them a brief moment to introduce themselves on the panel, and then we'll get into a few questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurel Haddix. I'm an attorney at the ACLU of Alabama. I have the pleasure of knowing Mr. Simelton not just as a co-strategist, but actually as a client. So I am one of the attorneys who filed the lawsuit against the recently passed SB1 bill. And I also work on the Milligan and Stone, the congressional and state redistricting cases. And it's a pleasure to be in this room with you all today.
Good afternoon. I'm attorney Gerald Griggs. I'm the president of the Georgia State Conference. I'm also a civil rights attorney in Atlanta. We also are suing the state of Georgia for SB 202, which is the equivalent of SB 1. So it's an honor to be here with President Simelton and the entire Alabama State Conference, and I look forward to a robust discussion on election protection.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benard, president of the Alabama State Conference of the NAACP, and I am not an attorney. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but it is what it is. But I certainly appreciate my colleagues for being here today, and Laura for representing us so well on the SB1. We're hoping to have a injunction decision here fairly soon so that this heinous bill will not go into effect until hopefully it won't go into effect at all, at least, but hopefully it's delayed until after the election. And so election protection is something that's is important, and I know a lot of people, kind of like myself, don't know exactly what election protection is, so maybe our moderator or one of our attorneys will give us the legal definition of election protection, but it's one of those things that is somewhat new, but it certainly is, the term may be new, but the work that needs to be done to ensure fair and equitable election is not. So with that being said, we'll turn it back to our moderator.
Well, as advocates and legal representation for our rights, where do you feel that most people get their voter education from and their awareness to their rights? Is this something that we assume people already understand? Are there centers of information where they can gain this information, and how can we as a community connect them to those sources?
So I think the main source in most of the southern states would be the NAACP because of our robust voter engagement, civic engagement programs. But our partners like the ACLU, as well as the Southern Poverty Law Center, and in Georgia, the Southern Center for Civil Rights, are some of the partners that have kicked off robust voter education programs. Of course, another partner, Black Voters Matter, does a lot of work in civic engagement and voter education. So those are a few of the organizations that do that work, but primarily the information is pumped out through the units of the individual state conferences.
I think in addition to that, you know, especially for younger people, they depend on social media to learn, to know what is going on in the with elections. And I'm not saying that information is always accurate, but I think they depend on that quite a bit. You know, the NAACP and other organizations we still do a little door knocking, and we have Zoom calls and to educate our units so that they can educate their members. And you know, we send stuff out through text, and we just partnered with the League of Women Voters to launch a campaign of writing postcard to encourage people to get out to vote. And I will say that, you know, the NAACP, like so many other organizations, is nonpartisan. So we put information out about, you know, the issues, about some of the candidates' position on the issues. And then we let you make your informed decision as to who you vote for. And we believe that you're smart enough that if you have the information before you and you know the candidate's position on those issues, that you will make the right decision when you go to the polls. But the problem is the number of, and I know I'm probably answering the question more than you want me to, Ms. Halsley, but the problem is getting people to the polls, and that was expressed yesterday as to with the voter turnout. And so with that, I'll cease my comments in the past. And I think some of our members on our Wednesday night call say I'll reserve my time.
So to zoom out a little bit, those answers are really helpful for sort of understanding the organizational landscape. From a statistical perspective, one of the greatest indicators of whether somebody is going to vote is whether their parents voted. And that comes from sort of the pattern and practice. I remember walking to the polls with my mom, and that became part of a understanding of civic responsibility that doesn't come from a website, a text, a tweet. And so from just stepping back to the most fundamental basics, are we taking our kids with us when we go to the polls? Are we taking our grandkids with us? Are we exposing them to the fact that voting isn't a thing that happens every 4 years? It happens multiple times a year. And that is one of the largest predictors. So even the work, the incredible work that all of these organizations are doing, the first fundamental driver is children at a young age being exposed to the fact that this is a part of what it means to be a participant in our democracy. The other resource that I just want to throw out that's has been a collaboration of a lot of orgs, including all of us here, is the 866-OUR-VOTE website. One thing that's really wonderful about that tool, which was a project of the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, is it actually shows the voter information for all 50 states. We know that different states have different measures, different procedures, and so if you are communicating, connecting with your family and friends who are in a different location, that's a resource you can point them to that isn't just Alabama specific, but can provide them a robust understanding of not just the processes for voting in each state, but their laws and protections, most of which are state specific.
Thank you. In your introductions, you guys described the SB1 and I believe SB 202 for Georgia. Is there a way that you can explain that in layman's terms of what they are, what they represent, how it affects us in our daily voting practices?
So many of you who are not natives to Georgia, SB 202 is, quote, the voter integrity bill. It was passed in 2021 after the historic turnout in the 2020 election and the 2021 election. And basically what it does, it allows for government takeover of local election boards. So the election boards can be dismantled, and then the governor can reappoint members of the local election board. It also allows for unlimited voter challenges. And so one thing we have in Georgia is a citizen can now challenge the voter status of an elector. And so there are now unlimited voter challenges both before, during, and after an election. It also reduces the number of drop boxes during the 2020 election. Many of the bigger counties had 10 to 15 drop boxes, and people were doing no excuse absentee voting. Well, certain individuals in Georgia thought that that was not a good idea, so they reduced it by population. So now the bigger counties would typically have, who had 12 to 13, would have 2. And so that would cut that. Then they cut the advanced voting period down from 6 to 8 weeks down to 4 weeks. They also cut weekend voting from 2 weekends to now 1 weekend. The sum total of SB 202 is to disenfranchise a group of people who they thought were illegally voting. So they call the voter integrity bill, or we call it the voter suppression bill. And in the state conference, we have sued the state of Georgia and are now in the process. We've survived summary judgment, and we are in the process of litigating it. We also were able to strike down a very important provision. One of the provisions was on the absentee ballot, which you have to use your voter ID to get. You would also have to put your identification information and a copy of your state ID on the ballot to return it. That part was struck down by the federal judge. The other part that the bill is so most famous for, and many people around the country know, is about the prohibition of line warming. And so in Georgia, we have really long lines in certain jurisdictions, and so they prohibit now providing food and water within 150 feet of the poll. We've challenged that as being inhumane and unjust. There are so many long lines in Georgia, many precincts that are in predominantly African American and minority run districts, that to not provide them food and sustenance when they're standing in line for 3 to 4 hours is inhumane. So we challenge that portion. But that's pretty much the substance of SB 202.
Okay, SB 1 is much different. SB 1 specifically deals with, and my attorney's here, so if I say something wrong, she might punch me. I'll say something I shouldn't say, she might punch me. But SB 1 is basically a bill that deals with the absentee ballot application. And you know how in large communities and neighborhood communities, Miss Jones or Miss Smith next door may say, "Hey, Wilbur, come over here and help me with this application." And while Wilbur is over there, she may say, "You want a piece of cake, a slice of pie, something?" Just being neighborly. But with SB 1, that could be considered a felony for ballot harvesting. And I still don't know exactly what ballot harvesting is, but I think that fits under the definition that the state of Alabama is trying to use. And, and it's just the application. It's not with the ballot itself, but, the state of Alabama, they try to be smart, because if they can prevent you from getting the application filled out properly, you'll never receive a ballot. And so it is considered a Class B felony and punishable by up to 20 years in prison if you're convicted. And there's other provisions with that, but that's the thing that we are fighting against. Is why should I even be threatened with any kind of penalty by having my neighbor fill out a absentee ballot application? And the state of Alabama does not have early voting, so if someone wants to do some kind of early voting, that is primarily the only way that they can do it. and and it's really a disenfranchisement on voters, and also it affects individuals with disability perhaps more than others, because people with disabilities are more likely to vote or won't vote absentee because they cannot or don't want to get out on the crowd on election day because they may not have transportation or may not can find anyone, so they want to ensure that they secures their ballot, and if I'm over there helping them with that ballot application, then I'm running the risk of possible being charged with felony. And the instruction I put out to our branches is to not to help with that. And so right, wrong, and indifferent, that's the instruction that we have given to the branches, so that they won't get themselves and all the organization in kind of trouble by doing something that's against the state law.
Everything you said was exactly right, despite not being an attorney. A couple things I just want to add. So SB 1 stands for Senate Bill 1. The reason it has the number 1 is because it was the first bill filed going into the Senate session. So that tells you the intensity in which the legislator, this was their priority. And a lot of this, as our friend from Georgia pointed out, is in response to the turnout rates during the 2020 election. There is this pendulum that swings in the history of not just Alabama, but across the United States, when there are increased numbers of Black voter turnout, when there is an election of Black Democratic candidates, when you win an additional Senate district in the state, it swings back to the suppression. An example of this was in 1979 in the state of Alabama. There was 2 women who were members of the Pickens County NAACP chapter who were registering people to vote en masse following the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The state of Alabama charged both of these women with felonies, of which they were convicted. And so now, less than 70 years later, we are back in the same place where, as Mr. Simelton said, Senate Bill 1 is focused on criminalizing those who assist, and that could include distributing, returning, helping, in any sort of way people fill out their absentee ballot applications. If money or a gift, which are undefined in the statute, they don't say what a gift is, they don't say what payment is, so it could be a postage stamp to even send in your application ballot, that is punishable, as was said, a Class B felony, which carries a maximum prison sentence of 20 years. Other Class B felonies in the state of Alabama include second-degree manslaughter and statutory rape. So that is the level of aggressiveness that we are dealing with in the attempt to suppress votes throughout the state of Alabama. Where we are in the case, if it would be helpful, is we have filed a complaint where the Alabama chapter of the NAACP is one of the plaintiffs in that, and where we are asking the court to do something called a preliminary injunction. So voting cases are a little bit unique. In most lawsuits, if you are harmed, you wait till the lawsuit is finished and then you can pay money damages to repair the harm. In voting cases, if an election occurs under unconstitutional conditions, they can't allow that election to be done over. There's no amount of money that can correct the outcome of a bad election. And so you can file for something called a preliminary injunction, which tells the court the harm here is so potentially dangerous and cannot be fixed with money that you need to tell the state that this law cannot go into effect. It has to be temporarily paused until we can litigate the rest of this case. That's what happened in the Milligan case, which many of you are familiar with. They filed for a preliminary injunction that eventually went to the Supreme Court saying, we cannot allow elections to take place in these unconstitutional districts where they have packed and cracked Black communities. And the Supreme Court agreed. So that case is still ongoing, but in the meantime, they weren't allowed to do elections with those unconstitutional districts in place. So we are asking the court to pause the implementation of Senate Bill 1, and we are hopeful that we will get a decision this summer or in the coming months while we wait for the rest of the case to play out.
And just to let you know, our strategy sessions are meant to be interactive. If you have a question at any time, please raise your hand. I should have known Ms. Taylor. She had a question ready. But seriously, this is for us to come together as a community. It's rare we get to be in a room with such experts to ask these questions directly. So, make sure you take advantage of that. Yes, Ms. Taylor.
Okay, like with the SB1, during election, and especially the one that we had in March, there were some amendments that we were supposed to be voting on. Where can someone go to get these amendments, get the definition, and say my sorority want to go into the community and explain what these amendments are so they'll know whether to vote yes or no? Where can we get these without being an attorney?
Well, I'm going to answer that in two ways. First of all is, the amendments that are on the ballots, they put them on there and really don't explain them or tell people about them. But if you go to the legislative website, it gives you a more thorough, I won't say understandable, but gives you more information about it. Now, here in the state of Alabama, I think everyone knows what the yellow ballot is, right? ADC puts out a sample ballot, and it's yellow. And in basically all the churches.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, President Simelton. Can you explain what the ADC is?
Oh, okay. Alabama Democratic Conference is basically the African American or black arm of the Democratic Party here in the state of Alabama. And so they put out a sample ballot that says this is their recommendation. And for years, the black community has depended on that sample ballot as to how they should vote on these. But the other part of that is, you go to the legislative website, it gives you more definition. Also, you can talk to your trusted, and I'll use the word trusted legislator, to get them to explain a little more about it. And so, or either go to the agency that's putting this bill on the amendment on the bill on the ballot to get them to provide more information. But you just be careful, make sure it's a trusted source.
So a couple things. So the Secretary of State's website will always have the sample ballot of the issues that are going to be on there. And so you can always direct folks to go to the Secretary of State's website, and it will show them exactly what will be on their ballot, which may be specific to the congressional or state district that they live in. So in addition to the other nonprofits, because I know that there is a distrust, understandably, of those state websites, but by law they have to reflect what will actually be shown. And so the Secretary of State's website is the first place you can go for that. I want to sort of step back and explain why organizations like the ACLU of Alabama and the NAACP often do not take partisan positions, because we are asked that all the time, and it actually has to do with our tax status. So 501c3s, which are nonprofits, are not tax exempt if they engage in partisan political behavior. And so in order to maintain your tax exempt status, you have to be very careful in terms of taking political positions. Now, some organizations like the ACLU of Alabama have a 501c3 status, but then also what's called a 501c4 status. Organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, other places have that C4 status that allows them to do some lobbying activities and still remain tax exempt. So oftentimes you have to look for community groups, partisan places to sort of see that breakdown. And it's not because people are trying to hide the ball. It's not because we at the ACLU of Alabama don't have strong feelings about a lot of these things, but it's because of our tax status. I think there's a couple organizations that do provide sort of that feedback. Rolling to the Polls on their social media sites, they often provide information on the constitutional amendments, but I think this is really good feedback for me to come back to the ACLU of Alabama and say, we should be putting together a directory of where people can look for information on those constitutional amendments. Because even if we can't provide a position, we should be providing resources to find that information. So I appreciate that question because it's giving me some work to come back to do and provide with our team.
Let me just add to that because the NAACP, actually we are 501c4, which means that we could become more partisan than we are. However, our national office has said explicitly that we will not, units of the NAACP will not take any kind of, partisan position on issues. So, but I just want to, for our units that are here, make sure that you understand that we are a 501c4 by the IRS code, and but national office has said you will not take any kind of positions, partisan position.
When I was saying definition, I wasn't necessarily asking for positions. I just wanted to know what these, because most of them have words and terms that the average American won't know. So wanted more, putting it in language terms, where could we go or who could we talk to get them to come back to the community and put it in language terms so they can make their own decisions.
And that's where, your legislator would come into play because, at least I don't know if any, the Secretary of State website is not going to put a lot of definition of what the language is trying to say, especially the amendments or anything else. I mean, basically they're going to repeat what is in the language of the amendment, but it has to go to a trusted source. I don't know in Georgia.
So the ACLU of Alabama, on our website, we have a tab called Legislative Hub. We're unable to do it with every single bill or amendment, but for key ones, we do sort of I'm not using this term, but a non-legalese breakdown of what these bills mean. So if you go to acluofalabama.org and you click on our legislative tab, particularly during the legislative sessions, and our hope is to build more robust voter guides that have the same thing. But that's one of those resources that you can direct people to.
And I was just going to say, the ACLU of Georgia actually does that for the amendment. So for those who are watching and those who are here from Georgia, if you go to the ACLU's page, it breaks down the amendments. But just like in Alabama, the Secretary of State puts all of your sample ballots in your My Voter page. I'm not sure it's the same here in Alabama, but it's mvp.sos.ga.gov. Shows you everything that's going to be on the ballot, and the amendments are typically in language that only a lawyer would understand. So those trusted sources you should trust, especially the ACLU's website in Georgia.
Thank you.
President Woodruff?
I was just want to ask Madam Esquire, you mentioned earlier, and this is for personal information, about the Pickens County case with the two people being prosecuted. I wasn't aware of that, and I just wanted to know what were they charged with?
Yes, so that was a 1979 case. They were charged with ballot harvesting. And so the idea that this terminology of ballot harvesting is new or is not a politically loaded term, again, this is like the cycle of history. So those two women who were charged, they were sentenced. There was huge public outcry. In fact, at their trial and sentencing hearing, the public broke out into the song "We Shall Overcome." They were sent to Tutwiler Prison, which is in Wetumpka, Alabama. During the appeals process, there was so much public backlash that the parole board actually decided to grant them parole, and they served the remainder of their sentence in Tuskegee at what at the time was sort of a work release facility. This is not the only case of this that we've seen in Alabama. Some people may be familiar with the Marion Three. Their story is a way more widely publicized story about individuals who were assisting illiterate or low education or disabled Black voters and were charged with ballot harvesting, were charged with voter fraud. And that's really what the language of SB 1 feels remnant of, is taking advantage of this politicized term that really holds very little statistical truth. Even the most conservative think tank, so the Heritage Foundation, which is considered a pretty right-leaning think tank, they have a database of all the cases of quote-unquote ballot harvesting, which the politicized idea is that there are people going and collecting and basically stuffing the ballot box like you would for homecoming king and queen. But the Heritage Foundation has a database of this, and their estimates are in the last 40 years, there have been less than 30 cases of ballot harvesting across the entire nation. And more sort of neutral or like the Brennan Center for Justice has said that those 30 cases are very exaggerated. And what's shocking about the cases in Alabama are most of the convictions for ballot harvesting or voter fraud. The individuals who were convicted were Republican candidates in their own district. It's not groups like the NAACP. It's not community groups who are focused on making sure that people have access to the ballot. And so part of this struggle and part of the legal struggle is unpacking this false myth of ballot harvesting that's being weaponized to be able to pass these bills through the legislature and criminalize marginalized communities.
Thank you.
So I'm going to play a little antagonistic role because we've kind of went down the road talking about ballot harvesting. If I am not necessarily engaged in the work, regular average Joe American, and someone says the term election integrity to me, integrity is a term that most of us would agree is something that we want to follow. It's something that we see value in. So how is it that we can educate and combat against that when somebody says to you, we're trying to protect the integrity of the election, and to use such a powerful term, how can we as the regular average Joe American be able to share that with our communities for people to understand, because in and of itself as a term, it seems like the right thing to follow.
So we have to realize we're fighting a battle on two fronts. We're fighting a messaging battle as well as a legal battle. And so from the cases that were just lifted up by my colleague from the ACLU, if there's only been 30 arguably plausible cases, and in Georgia, there were 60 cases that challenged the election and none of them found any form of election fraud, we have to name that in a way that people understand. Namely, there's zero evidence that anything nefarious happened in the 2020 election, no matter how many people tweet about it, no matter how many stories are written about it, no matter how many times people have this conversation. Because what's happening in this information age is there is an age of disinformation. And so we have to be clear with folks that the 2020 election was the most secure election of our lifetime. Even in Georgia, they put on a little sticker, which I have here, that said, "I secured my vote." So if we secured our vote in Georgia, which is ground zero for this whole conversation about election integrity, protecting the ballot, we need to name it. And one of the easiest ways to name it when people start talking about that is that there's only one political candidate. And again, we're instructed by national not to go into partisan politics, but we can talk about legal cases. There's only one person in this particular race that we're talking about that has a charge that says the state of Georgia versus somebody for election interference. So when they start talking about people are subverting the right to vote, there's a grand jury in Fulton County that said a certain person did that, and hopefully at some point, either before or after this election, there'll be a trial jury that will weigh in on the actual facts. So I think that's how you combat that misinformation.
I think my colleague's exactly right that it's an evidentiary battle first and foremost, but it's also a narrative battle, because to me, election integrity is the fact that it doesn't matter how many hours you work, it doesn't matter your disability, but that everybody has the opportunity to participate in our democracy. That's real election integrity. And Alabama is already one of the most difficult states in the entire United States to vote. We are one of the only states that doesn't automatically give the right to vote absentee for people over the age of 65, for people who are disabled. You look at statistics about election integrity in states like Colorado, where there are broad access to voting early, voting in person early, where there are drop-off boxes, and you don't see cases of election fraud there. So it's not about needing more laws, more restrictions, and more barriers. True election integrity would be a legislator that is focused on passing legislation to create more opportunity for every person's vote to be counted. The other thing I just wanted to say is, before the passage of SB 1, ballot harvesting was already illegal. Ballot harvesting is already illegal in every single state. When you submit your absentee ballot application, your signature is certifying that you are not committing fraud. That already exists across the board. These are just additional barriers, additional restrictions that are unnecessary, duplicative, and whose real aim is to suppress the vote, not to actually get at the so-called idea of integrity.
I definitely agree about the narrative aspect. We live in a new world where we have so much access to information. This thing right here can tag us into misinformation, disinformation, real information, fake information, or what some like to title fake news, which isn't fake. But I do think that we have to work a little bit harder, because sometimes what seems as common sense to us is not so common. And that's why they say if you repeat a lie long enough, it sounds like the truth. And I think sometimes we look at information and we're like, that makes no sense at all, but we're not combating it enough with the correct information so the squeaky wheel is getting the oil. Is that something that you guys would concur?
Absolutely, and we have to realize that we are in an information age, and so it's incumbent upon all of us, when we hear misinformation, we see it on these platforms, to correct the narrative in real time. I know a lot of people say, man, stay out of the comments, don't read the comments. Sometimes you got to read the comments, and sometimes you have to reply to the comments, because if you leave a lie alone long enough, people will start to believe the lie. And so I think we have to push back on that. We have to re-inject common sense into a discourse, a national discourse, a state discourse, because many of our politicians have really literally gone off the farm. They are really believing this stuff. And as an attorney, an officer of the court, it's literally mind-blowing that one branch of government would truly pick to go into a place that is so anti-American, so anti-truth, that another branch, or at least members of the branch, are now coming out and saying, hey, that's not how the system works. That's not what the law actually says. You don't have the freedoms of speech to just incite violence and lie that causes political discourse to break down and become anti-democratic. So I think we have to combat it everywhere it shows up, whether that's newspaper, the news, social media, real life, that the sky is actually blue, it's not green, it's not yellow, and you can't be a patriot if you're trying to take down the democracy, regardless of how much money you have.
That's a very good point. I am the mother of 5 teenagers, future voters, and it's amazing the information that they ask me just at the dinner table. Mom, do you know about this? Or did you know this was happening? And just listening to it, it's like, you actually believe that? But unfortunately, there is not enough of the other voices for them to hear that, and they are our future. So I just wanted to really make that point. Now, I know we've kind of focused a lot on the barriers of why we need to protect the election. What are some of the tools that we have that we can take back to our communities to support protecting the election and our right to vote?
So from a legal perspective, the largest protection we have is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Voting Rights Act guarantees, even though pieces of it have been gutted, as we know here in Shelby County, but it still guarantees that a right to vote cannot be denied or abridged on account of race, on account of language, or on account of disability. Some positive news is that the pendulum always comes back. We always eventually win. And I think that Milligan is such a good example of that. You have Shelby County v. Holder, which happens in 2013, where the Supreme Court says we no longer need protection in these southern states with this history of voter disenfranchisement. We all knew that wasn't true. We all knew that that wasn't the reality. But the pendulum swinging back is in 2020, a majority Republican court not being able to deny the statistical reality that in the state of Alabama, despite the Black population increasing since the last census, that the way that our legislator was drawing the maps was putting all of the Black population either in one district to sort of cramp all of their power in one place, or was splitting up Black communities among multiple districts so that their power was diluted. And so I often don't feel necessarily hopeful about relying on the law, but I do feel hopeful about justice. The law and justice are two different things. We live in a country where you have a right to own a firearm, but you don't have a right to education. The Constitution does not guarantee you a right to education. And so it's not about a reliance on the law, but about how do we move the law and justice to be the same thing. And so I think what we have to say is, even in these moments where some protections of the Voting Rights Act have been stripped from us, how do we get the pendulum to swing back? How do we keep showing up? How do we keep telling the stories and the narratives and the impact of what it means to try to vote in this landscape? And when we fight, we do win. It just may not be today or tomorrow, but voting rights aren't something that we won in 1965. They're something we win every single day. And so I don't feel hopeful about the current landscape of legal protections, but I know it's going to come back around.
As voters, it's your responsibility and our responsibility to, first of all, know who's running for office, know the issues that are on the ballot, and again, like I said earlier, know the individual, the candidate's position on these particular issues. You know, you just can't go to the poll and say, well, oh, who am I going to vote for? I mean, you can, but you're not an informed, educated voter. And so organizations like the NAACP and others you know, we are interested in making sure that you are informed voters. So attending forums like this in your community, you know, talking to people you trust in your community about really what's on the ballot, you know, and as I tell everyone, I said this over and over this weekend, you know, Trump and Biden are on the ballot, their names on the ballot. But as you unpeel that onion, there's much more on the ballot than that. President Biden said the other day that, you know, probably next president will have an opportunity to appoint two Supreme Court justices. Lifetime appointments. They have no integrity. And I think you see that happening, playing out now. And I do mean that somewhat literally. But those are lifetime appointments, plus all the federal judges that person will have an opportunity to appoint. You know, our criminal justice system, our health care, all those issues on the ballot, EEOC, affirmative action, all those issues are on the ballot. So we must understand and educate ourselves from reading about the candidates, going to political forums and asking the candidate, or either picking up the phone and calling and asking, what is your position on, you know, reproductive rights? You know, what is going to be your position on those issues? Or write to their campaign if you can't get them on the phone. So as voters, we have an obligation to be informed, and organizations, again, like the NAACP, ACLU, Arise, and others just in the state of Alabama, you know, we try to educate you on the issues, not on the candidates themselves, I mean, for who to vote for. But you have to be willing to do some research yourself and understand the candidate's position and really what's on the ballot.
You know, one of the reasons why when President Simelton invited me to come to Alabama for this, I was so excited to come, is because of the work in Alabama. The things that Alabama has done over the last 70 years. There's a young lawyer who's not young anymore, who lives in Tuskegee, who really set the bar so high. His name is Fred Gray. And so when I look at the makeup of the Supreme Court currently, I look at Fred Gray, who said that I need to file enough lawsuits to get the change that we demand. And he did that in a court that was way more conservative than this one, and that's hard to believe. But the Warren Court, when it first started, was extremely conservative. I believe the president who appointed Earl Warren was asked the question, what was his biggest mistake as a president? And he said, he's seated on the Supreme Court. And so when you think about that, I think about a young preacher that came to Alabama that made a great statement. He made a statement that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Well, we're the hip-hop generation, so we remixed that statement from that young preacher from Georgia. The moral arc of the universe is long, but black people bend it towards justice. Or better yet, black folks from Alabama bend it toward justice. And so, y'all have a legend already here. This man has won a Supreme Court case. That's something you don't see every day. Lawyers have won a Supreme Court case in this generation. And so when I look at what's happening, we got to do two things. One, we got to vote like Alabama and like Georgia. And two, we got to spend a little bit more time in federal courthouses. Because, you know, I left my 16-year-old and my 4-week-old at home in Georgia to come spend some time in Alabama. And as I was driving down the highway and I saw legendary signs. I saw Birmingham, I saw Montgomery. I'm probably going to head back to Tuskegee before I go home. And I think about what those individuals did such a long time ago or last year. And I think that we are at a moment in history where we have the colliding of two forces. One, we have the wherewithal and the education to make sure we make good on our ancestors' wildest dreams. And number two, we are in the golden age of the internet where we can do exactly what they did on television, on computer screens. So, where am I hopeful? I'm hopeful because Clarence is getting old, Alito is getting old, and all we need is two to swing it back. So let's swing it back. Again, I remember what y'all did in 2016, Doug Jones? I remember what y'all did in 2018. Where do you think Georgia got the blueprint from? We didn't just figure it out on our own. We thought, hey, look what Alabama's doing. Okay, we need to do two things. We need to vote like Alabama, and we need to get Kirby. Yeah, it's not that in there. So I just think the hopefulness is in the black people in the South. And here's what I would ask my brothers and sisters in Alabama to do. One, to vote like Alabamans. And two, to have a conversation with the state next to y'all and the state next to them. Because, you know, a majority of black people either live or are from the South. So why don't we re-engineer a reverse Southern strategy? Why don't we get black folks to vote like we do the electric slide? If black folks voted like we do the electric slide, we wouldn't be worried about no racial gerrymandering. We wouldn't be worried about no voter suppression bills, because there's a wonderful young lady who's from Mississippi. She spent some time in Alabama, and she came over to Georgia and ran for governor. And she said, if we overwhelm the ballot box, they can't suppress their way out of that. That's the message that we got to go back into our communities. Because we are going to win. When we fight, we win. Y'all know that. That's the NAACP's motto. Now, what we have to do is continue to do what this great president is doing, what this young lawyer over here is doing, what we're trying to do in Georgia, is to show it to them on live stream the same way they saw it on a TV screen. We're not going backwards. It's not 1850 and it's not 1950. And so the hope that I have is in Alabamians and Georgians showing the world that we've done this before. We've seen voter suppression. We've seen how many bubbles in a bar soap, literacy tests. Now we're seeing voter challenges. We're seeing voter purges. We've seen all this before. So let's sue them all the way up to the Supreme Court till Clarence gets tired.
All right now. One of the things that you tend to bring up a lot is the history here in Alabama. Unfortunately, we have a generation that's not connected to that history the same way that they should be. What are some tactics or things that we can do to link our young voters to understand the importance and the things that have been done? Because I've actually spoken to individuals in their 20s and even in their 30s who have said, that's a long time ago. That's not relevant for us. Marches don't work, rallies don't work, things of that nature don't work. How do we teach our youth, which is the ones who did the majority of the work in the civil rights, it was the young folks, how do we mobilize them now to get them to do the things that you're asking to be done and to vote like Alabamians?
I think it starts with meeting people where they're at. When, my brother is a Gen Zer, and when we are discussing things, it's very easy to have a posture of dismissiveness. but that's not going to bring him to the polls. Berating him, there is an opportunity to say, let me connect with you. What do you care about? Because even if people are uninterested in voting, there's a reason why. They think it won't matter. They don't think they have power. They're in circumstances that they say, my parents voted for X, Y, and Z years, and we're still experiencing these things. And so I think meeting people where they're at and helping them, even if it's not necessarily on a national level, understanding on a very local level, who holds the power to make decisions about the things you care about? And being okay if maybe the things they care about aren't the same things that you care about. But we can find a place there. They want better schools. They want higher paying jobs. They want to have public space to be with their friends. How do you explain our system of governance as an opportunity for them to build the world that they want? And I think it's meeting people where they're at. It's being open to having intergenerational spaces where it may be uncomfortable. We may not like the TikTok. We may be upset, about some of the energy that is brought into that space. But what would it look like if we met people where they were at instead of approaching things from a place of, I have to get you to see from my place and my perspective. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is we have to instill in young people this confidence that it may not be immediate, but it is possible to build the world that we want. There's this piece of vision that is oftentimes missing. Young people see the world and it's not, I think most young people would say that this is not their ideal world. This is not the place they want to be. And so how do we tell the stories of our ancestors or even the people who are still in the space with us as it's not just about fighting for what we don't want, it's fighting for the world that we do want. What does that look like to you? How do we do that? Again, starting on the local level. What would it mean if you were able to organize your fellow classmates to get things done in your school, to get things done in your community? I think that there's a lot of power in telling young people that they are capable of creating a better world and that they have a responsibility, just like the people who came before them and just like the people who came after them. So meeting young people where they are at, asking them what they want, what their needs are, what their desires are, and then connecting it to a system of governance to make them understand what their power is, and also being honest about the limitations of it. As we do all have power, but we also are fighting up against suppression. And both of those things can be true. We can hold those truths together. And so I think for me, that's where I try to meet young people and try to get them involved in this work.
So here's how you meet the young people. You got to give them some wins. You got to show them that marching and protest work. And that's what we've been successful in Georgia doing. What young people want to see is the energy and fire of the last generation, coupled with the professionalism and the wisdom. And so what I think the key is pointing to them to the victories they saw in their lifetime. And so that's why, I always talk about the history of Georgia, I talk about the history of Alabama, but then I bring it to the largest protest in the history of this country, where the young people are outside. Now the issue is our politicians didn't recognize the power of that moment. Let's be clear. The George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks protest of 2020 was what mobilized folks to the polls. But we have some politicians that wanted feel-good moments instead of legislation. So we can't point to the legislative victory that we should have had in the largest civil rights demonstration of this generation. And so that's why young people keep it real. They're saying right now, we voted, we didn't get anything out of it. And so that's why whenever any politician comes into Georgia trying to get Georgia's votes, I respond to them, you still have about 5 months to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. You still have about 5 months to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So now I can point to the young people and say, hey, remember y'all was outside? Y'all said no justice, no peace. Y'all made sure that y'all voted with your feet and then voted at the ballot box and then showed back up in 2021 and showed back up in 2022 and showed back up in 2023. So now, if you go back out there and vote in 2024, I promise you this, it's going to be real hard for any politician to come into our community without any deliverables. Because what are the young people saying? They're saying, where are the deliverables? And that's on me as an activist. If I don't provide the deliverables by keeping heat on our politicians to the point that they know these votes aren't free, now I can't point to the young people and say, here's the victory. So our young people fully understand the civil rights legacy. They also fully understand the legacy of social justice that they are bringing today. What we have to do is make sure that the Brian Kemps and the Governor Ivies and the guy over there in Texas and the guy down there in Florida understand that this ain't 1950, you're not going to win. And then the guy who's running around the country stirring folks up, we got to treat him like y'all treated George Wallace. If he wants to be George Wallace, we can make him George Wallace. And we have to show the young people how they do that so they can equate, I march, I protest, I win. Repeat, I march, I protest, I win. I give you an example. Whenever young people say marching and protesting don't work, it sure worked in Scintilla Shores when Freedom Summer 2020 started, because I believe there was a young jogger in Scintilla Shores that was lynched by 3 white vigilantes in a white pickup truck. And those 3 white vigilantes in a white pickup truck are in a Georgia correctional facility for the rest of their lives. And then when they get done with the rest of their lives in the Georgia correctional facility, they'll spend another life sentence in a federal correctional facility. So when they ask, what were we marching and voting for? In Georgia, we can say, we marched and voted to send the McMichaels and William Rodney Bryant to prison. And then we elected 2 senators. We changed the White House. And then we made sure we protected our rights. And we got a Civil Rights Act. Now, I'm going to let y'all pause on that. Georgia did not have a Civil Rights Act until 2020. So we got to give them victories. We got to show them wins. And so my request to you as Alabamians is when both political candidates who are running at the top of the ticket, as well as all the way down, start making promises, you start holding them accountable. You say, well, you say that black men don't want to vote, or you say that black women don't want to vote. So here's what we need. We need y'all to fully fund education. We need y'all to actually do some criminal justice reform. We need y'all to, I don't know, stop having the NAACP being the ones suing for voting rights and the Justice Department actually do that. And then you'll see the young people be like, oh, they're actually making them do some things. Maybe this voting stuff actually works. Maybe the marching and protesting works. I don't know. Maybe suing folks actually works. So you start showing them these things are working by holding the politicians accountable to less rhetoric and more action, and you'll see them get fired up.
So we're saying that the solution is accountability for those who are elected, but also making sure that narrative of what is actually happening is being produced as well so people know. I'm going to be a little transparent, and hopefully President Simelton won't be too upset with me. I did not become an intentional voter until I was 42. Not saying that I never voted, but I wasn't an intentional voter. And when I came to work for the NAACP, we had a lot of discussions about why I was not an intentional voter. It was not until I heard these narratives, the stories, I learned about Shelby V. Holder and got involved in the work that I realized how important my vote was. And I think sometimes, I have 3 degrees, 2 at the graduate level, so it's not for lack of reading or education, but I think that sometimes there is information that we assume people know that they really don't know. And that's why we're here committed to the Shelby Summit every year, because if it wasn't for the Shelby Summit, I would not have become an intentional voter. So I just want you to know that you guys are actually a part of history right now, coming here to this summit. This is not something that we just sit in the office and say, hey, we're just going to come together at the University of Montevallo and just get some speakers up here. We're making change here. Even if it's just one, we are definitely making change. So I just wanted to address that personally from my own testimony. One of the things that I want to talk about is barriers to the polls. You briefly mentioned about those who are disabled, how they have difficulty getting to the polls. How do we protect their rights, especially with SB 1?
Well, people who are with disability have, they have a right just like you and I do. Because they have a disability doesn't mean that they should not participate in the political process or have access to the government building itself, And so we must, I think, also kind of meet them where they are, meaning that if there's someone there that, can't get out of the house, they're bedridden, let's take it to them. I will give you an example, at least the Red Cross has shared with me. Rick Schofield from the Red Cross, he's in Mississippi now, but I consider him a friend because we worked together a number of years. He called me a couple weeks ago and said, Benard, there's going to be a lot of hurricanes this season, and we need to start preparing for it. Now, I know y'all saying, well, what does it have to do with voting? But what he told me is we need to think outside the box, because what if a hurricane hits on or near election day? What are we going to do to ensure that those people who are maybe in shelters for 3 or 4 days, what are we going to do to ensure that they have an opportunity to vote? And so meeting people where they are, we need to be talking to our probate judges and making sure that they are, first of all, enforcing the federal laws, voting rights, federal laws, and then ensuring that they are enforcing the right for every person to have access to the ballot. And some of that will include absentee voting, and so that people will have an opportunity to vote early, because, again, in the state of Alabama, the only way you can vote early is to vote absentee. And in the bigger picture is to start changing those laws to where we have a true absentee voting mechanism in the state of Alabama, where we can have laws that allow us to have drop boxes in different communities to drop ballots off, curbside voting. Secretary of State, they don't want to hear that. But if we come together with our state legislature and other organizations, we can make those changes to ensure that our people who are need those services, need to vote that way, will be able to carry out and